Hello, my dear patrons. Welcome to Writing Beauties, my mini-series for all you aspiring writers out there. Every story needs a conflict, or else nothing will happen and the story would be very boring. The protagonist or main character will need an opposition, and sometimes that opposition is another character. And this is called the antagonist. The storybook term would be villain. If you've ever watched a Disney or superhero movie, the characters you might remember the most are the villains. Sometimes they are so compelling you find them more likable or identifiable than the heroes. But how do you do that? Make a villain memorable and good opposition for the hero. First of all, I would like to point out that a villain and an antagonist are not particularly the same thing. Villain refers to someone with ill intent or morals, someone who does bad. Antagonist is someone who opposes the protagonist, but is not always a necessarily evil person. Sometimes the villain is the protagonist, like Thanos in Infinity War, and the heroes opposing him become the antagonist in that story. But in the traditionally black and white concept of good and evil, the antagonist is usually a villain. Now, villains can range from schoolyard bully to corrupt politician to supernatural evil overlord. There's no one-size-fits-all formula for a villain. What kind really depends on your genre and your hero. Now, in a superhero setting, likely your villain will have superpowers of some kind, like laser eyes or magnetic powers, right? Not necessarily. If your hero has powers, of course you want a villain who will put up a fight with an equal amount of power or even more. In the case of Superman, who is as OP or overpowered as they get, the power of flight, super speed, strength, laser eyes, invulnerability, etc., many of his enemies tend to be superpowered as well. From aliens to mutants to interdimensional beings who can manipulate reality, foes that the police can't handle on their own. Because if they were just run-of-the-mill criminals, why not just let the police handle them? And these villains are powerful enough that Superman can't finish the fight in just one punch. That'd be a very short comic or TV episode or movie. However, Superman's arch-nemesis, Lex Luthor, doesn't have any powers. His power is his intellect and charisma as a businessman. With that intellect, he builds himself a power suit and gets away with crimes using his connections and money. And he has a god complex to drive him to beat Superman with his godlike powers. So yeah, a villain doesn't always have to be superpowered. In contrast, Batman's villains tend to be more psychological or use nifty gadgets to match Batman's intellectual prowess. Bruce Wayne's pretty much the good Lex Luthor in the DC universe. He doesn't have any real superpowers of his own, just his smarts and money. But villains like the Joker, the Riddler, and the Penguin don't have powers, but are intellectual matches for Batman. That's not to say Batman can't face villains with powers like Poison Ivy and, at some points, Superman. Because he has the smarts to find an opponent's weakness and expose them. Which kind of made Batman vs. Superman dumb because Superman could have just easily beaten up Batman, or Batman could have just taken out the kryptonite that he keeps locked away in his Batcave. But not all villains are like in the comic books. In fantasy, they tend to be evil witches or wizards. In the science fiction, evil aliens or robots taking over the world, even just mad scientists. In horror, they tend to be monsters or serial killers. In teen drama, it might just be the mean girls or boys. But the same rules apply. A villain's abilities must be strong enough to oppose the hero. Be the hero's equal, but with opposite goals or morals. Villains aren't always smart. They can be dumb, which is good if you want it to be comedic, but they have to have some strength. From literal strength to riches to popularity control over the masses. Take Marv and Harry from Home Alone. They are cat burglars who are not entirely smart. They have some smarts. But they have the advantage over Kevin, the kid Home Alone, of being older. However, Kevin's a lot smarter than them, and that's how he's able to get the upper hand. But it's still a challenge because there's two big guys against one little boy. Of course, there's some debate of whether Kevin is the actual villain in that movie. Now, villains are generally perceived as evil, but that alone doesn't make them a good villain. A good villain thinks what they're doing is justified, and when you see that side, you might relate to that. Villains awaken our innermost, darkest thoughts. Everything we've thought about doing, but morals and laws have stopped us from doing it. Villains in fiction satisfy those urges. Take Captain Hook from Peter Pan. He's a bad guy, not opposed to killing kids. But on the other hand, pun very much intended, this annoying boy cut off his hand and fed it to a crocodile and continuously taunts him for it. And now he's got this hungry crocodile chasing after him. Of course Hook is pissed. Wouldn't you be? Not saying it's right for him to take revenge and kill a bunch of kids, especially some kids who had nothing to do with what happened, but at least you could see why he thinks that he is in the right. Not everything is black and white. No one is 100% good or evil. Even villains can have morals, like they could have someone they care about, or they do bad things but in the name of good. Kind of what you would call an anti-hero. Take Hannibal Lecter from Silence of the Lambs, one of the greatest fictional villains ever. He's a cannibalistic serial killer with a high IQ, a very dangerous man. But when he meets with our protagonist, Clarice Starling, he's very polite in a respectable yet eerie way. And he only eats rude people who he feels deserve it, but not people he likes, such as Clarice. Remember when I said the villains are not always the antagonists? Sometimes the script is flipped, and the story is about the supposed bad guy or girl, like in the movie Maleficent, the story of the evil fairy who cursed Sleeping Beauty. In that, the antagonist was King Stefan, who broke Maleficent's heart and stole her wings. That carries a lot more weight than her not being invited to a christening. Sometimes you can have a villain become the hero towards the end, like in DreamWorks' Megamind or Illumination's Despicable Me, or Beauty and the Beast. Why I like blurring the lines of hero and villain in stories is because it makes the characters much more complex. Or maybe the antagonist isn't necessarily a bad person, but opposes a protagonist in another way. Maybe they face competition. Or it can be as simple as family drama, which could lead to characters working out their difficulties in the end. Even the best of people morally can get into conflicts with others. That doesn't make them evil, but it makes them human. But you don't have to have an antagonist to make the story interesting. Sometimes the problem the protagonist faces is society, or nature, or themselves. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Dr. Jekyll literally becomes his own antagonist. But if you are making a villain, make us love to hate them. And give them a reason to be evil unless you want something cheesy and cartoony. Nothing wrong with that if that's what you're going for. And remember, no one is totally evil or good. We all have our dark and light sides. Some people just tend to show one more than the other. Be sure to look out for the next poll in your email for the next Writing Beauties topic. Until then, practice writing and stay beautiful.